Good evening, John, or good day.
Good morning.
Yeah, whatever time it is, right?
Yes.
Hey,
How are
thanks for
you?
having me here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm living in Florida. It's sunny. I get to go outside, and this day and age, that makes me happy.
Good to hear, good to hear. So you have a question for John, right?
Yes, so I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and of course, I was already in awe with your track record of the different jobs you had. But I have to admit, I kind of got sidetracked when I saw Disney. Because, well, I can tell you, I'm a huge Disney fan. And the other thing that really triggered my question that I want to ask is that I saw that you are a great storyteller as well. So for me to learn to do storytelling, I attended different Toastmasters clubs, and I know that's even a well-known institute in the U.S. So it will probably not surprise you that one of my favorite topics within Toastmasters is the impromptu speaking. And I got the honor to prepare some impromptu speaking questions in my past in Toastmasters. And my most favorite one was to basically surprise the speakers by asking them which Disney princess do you want to be, and please explain to me why. So I have to admit that I kind of persuaded Sjoukje to give me some airtime to ask you that question.
That's awesome. Actually, I love asking that question myself. When I worked for Disney, quick side story is one of the questions I would ask people during interviews is, what's your favorite Disney character? Overall Disney character. And I thought it was fascinating how this is just to break the ice. It was fascinating how some people would come back with Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny or people that are totally not Disney, which I thought was always interesting. I'm like, you're applying for a job at Disney and you're telling me you're not Disney.
Yeah.
um,
Nerves.
yeah, I think princess
Nerves for
wise,
the interview. Yeah.
I think I have three daughters and they all like different Disney princesses as their own. One of my daughters loves Ariel. Another one, honestly, Snow White's probably her favorite princess, but Stitch is her favorite character. And then the other one, it is definitely Rapunzel. And for me, my favorite, it might be Merida from Brave, although it changes a
Yeah,
lot. She's just so independent and so awesome and kind of just does everything her own way. Although I like Raya a lot too. So
that
I
makes
like the
sense.
strength in the characters.
Well, that's great to hear, but I didn't want to distract you from your presentation.
No, let's
Uh,
talk about Disney. Let's do Disney instead. Come on.
yeah, that would definitely get everyone excited, but I'm pretty sure that you have an awesome story to share as well. So I will not keep you from that or keep the audience from another great story. So I'll just let you get started and just think about some more Disney princesses to go over in the questionnaire afterwards.
I think I will, and maybe we can ask folks in the chat or the questions, to tell us who your favorite Disney character is, or maybe you can spot some Disney-related things in my office behind me during the conversation today. So,
Nice.
I like that
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. Good.
um, so you got me smiling. That's a good thing. So talk. I'm really happy to be here for Azure Thursday because one of the things I love talking about lately is Azure Static Web Apps, and to tell you why I love this so much, it's because my background as an engineer and architect, I find that this solves a problem I knew I had. Far too often in the tech industry, I think we see people coming out with solutions and they tell you how amazing something is, but they don't necessarily tell you what problem it's solving. Or if they do, you're like, that's great, but I never had that problem in the first place. So today, I'm going to talk to you about how I feel like this could solve a lot of the things that you're already struggling with today. So to begin, we'll start with a little story. Why not? And this story is all about modern day and age. And imagine, you're a developer and you're building an application. And the most fun part for you is probably putting the application together. Maybe you choose React or Vue or Svelte or Angular. Could be anything. You're building the application, you got the CSS working, things are looking and feeling good to you. That's the fun part. Now your boss tells you, we have to deploy this. Well, okay, you just had a lot of fun writing the code. Like developers like to develop. I'm with you, I feel that. But when you deploy it and you want to put a production scale app, maybe for millions of users to use, you now have to think about, how do I do source control? How do I push this up to something like GitHub? What's my branching strategy? How do I manage CI and CD, continuous integration and continuous deployment? Do I have to connect any wires up to make all this work? Because I want to make sure when I make changes, they get out to my production sites. What about my APIs? Most of my applications have data, so I've got to have a back end somewhere that I can connect to. Now, once I've got those APIs running, do they scale? And once you introduce a back end that's different from your front end, maybe your front end's running on a CDN, maybe your back end's running on serverless functions. You now have to route your requests from the front end to the API. And I know what you're all thinking, cores. Oh, how do we handle cores up there now? So now we've got to manage making sure we've got that all set up to route those requests, or maybe API management. Okay, we all have to worry about security at some point, so we need SSL certificates, which are always fun to go obtain and then connect to our sites, make sure we're always secure. And then maybe you want a custom domain. We don't want some random IP or URL to be up there. We want our address to be something like shopathome.dev, which you can try out for our demo. How about authentication? You are the person that you say you are. When you log in, I want to know that you are John, or you are Sally, or you are Mary. I want to know that you are who you say you are. So I need authentication. And of course, I also need to know authorization. What can Mary or Sally do when you log into the application? So now I have roles. Security isn't just SSL. It's also making sure we got authentication and authorization. We also need global scale. We're doing this across the world right now. You could be in Europe, in Asia, in North America. You could be anywhere in the world. So I want to make sure I've got my points of presence set up. What does that mean? It means that somebody in India can hit our website and they're hitting the closest, fastest location to get to the application. CDNs, right? Oh my gosh. You know, I just took the fun out of developing, right? We're just like, we want to build this website. We want to write our code. I want to use my React or Angular, and I want to put things together. Now my boss is really dragging me down by saying, I have to make sure that this is really a solid, fully architected solution. And you can do this in any cloud environment, but you just want to build a web app. So what choices do you have? Well, it gets worse, right? Because you can choose things like Angular or React or Svelte or Vue or whatever your favorite framework is. You want to make sure that any of those tools you use will work in that architecture and environment. Now, all of these tools today have changed the way the web works. Years ago, we used to be able to drop a script into a page and it was a web app and you run and you're done. There was no build process. But today, all these applications, we run commands like npm run build. Why does this matter? Think about what happens when you build your app locally. You take your application, you run npm run build locally on your machine, it generates the code, your assets, and then you launch it locally. Well, if you push the code up into GitHub and then launch it into the cloud, say to Azure, who's building the code? You can't just take the source code and push it to the cloud, or can you? So we run npm run build, right? And then something spins inside of our computer and it makes sure it's got the right assets and it outputs the three basic pieces of a website: HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. All browsers are going to be able to read these. And then it lights up our web application. That's what we really want. We want something to build that and launch it to the site. Now, what I'm going to tell you is today, Azure Static Web Apps will do a lot of this for you and make all that monotony that I just talked about really go away, so you can just focus on the part that you love, which is writing the code. So we're going to quickly deploy a web app with scale and security and a lot of other fun big words. And my name's John Papa. I work for Microsoft in the Student and Education Cloud Advocacy team. And I want to show you how easy it is to use static web apps with your application. So at the core, static web apps lets you build and host your web apps. And the build piece is huge. Of course, we want it to host them. But remember, we talked about that run build step. npm run build. It's got to happen somewhere. So where are we going to do that? It's going to handle that for us. It's going to make authentication and authorization relatively easy for us to include in our application. And we'll see that too. We can also optionally include APIs powered by Azure Functions. Now, if you want to use APIs from another service or your own backend, you can also do that. But if you choose Azure Functions, it'll automatically connect them for you without having to worry about setting up cores to go across the proxy. And today you can choose whether you want to use GitHub or Azure DevOps for your CI/CD provider for Azure Static Web Apps. We'll be using GitHub here in the demo today. But let's take a look at a picture of how this works. You make some code changes, the fun part. I make some code changes, things get running, I'm feeling good about it locally. I then push that up to my source control, let's say GitHub or Azure DevOps. And then that goes through its build process, the continuous delivery. At that point, it's going to build the code up in Azure for us. And it's going to generate the static content, our HTML, images, JavaScript, CSS, fonts, for example. And optionally, if we have any functions, it'll push those up there. And collectively, those built assets get published to Azure at scale. And that is Azure Static Web Apps. The only thing you have to do is write your code and push to GitHub. Write your code, push to GitHub. That's it. Now, one side note here, what I think is really interesting here is when you run it locally on your machine, if you want to test it on your local machine, just like it's going to work inside of Azure, you can use something called the Static Web Apps CLI. The Static Web Apps CLI is a great tool that comes with Static Web Apps, and you can use it through Visual Studio Code if you'd like to in the terminal. And what it lets you do is it lets you launch your web app and your API and your authentication authorization requests, and it emulates like it's running inside of Azure. Why is this important? Because remember, when you're running a web app and your authentication, you don't have the authentication server on your local machine. So if you want to emulate authentication and authorization, you need something to help you with that. So it'll let you emulate it locally, so what you run locally when it works will also run in the cloud. Another way to put it is, works on my machine, works in the cloud. So let's take a look at how this works through a demo. I've got a multi-part demo I want to show you, and here's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at an application, writing with some code, and then we're going to take that code and we're going to connect an API to it to get our data. We'll use the shop at home example where we get a list of products like strawberries. And then we're going to set up authentication and authorization for the application. Now it's going to do a bunch of things for us. And let's review a lot of the stuff that's going to happen under the covers. All we care about is writing the code for the app. Under the covers, though, I'll peel back so you can see what's in there. Part of what's in there is we'll be using GitHub for our source control. And then we're also going to get, out of the box, we're going to get scale. This is going to go across to multiple points of presence on the web or CDNs. We're going to automatically get our custom domain that we can set up with our application. As long as you purchase a domain, you can establish it. We're going to get Azure Functions. We're going to get routing between the Functions app automatically with the application. So it's going to connect those two for us with a proxy, reverse proxy. And it's also going to set up CI/CD for us out of the box. And then we're also going to look at authentication and authorization in the app. So let's get out of some slides here. And let's go look at the running app first. So I'm going to show you a version of the app, just because we get to pick what we want, running in Vue, Angular, React, or Svelte. I've color-coded these to the base colors of each of the application, but there are 4 versions of this application running in 4 different Azure Static Web Apps accounts. And just to show you that it doesn't matter if you're using Svelte, React, Angular, or Vue, or whatever your favorite flavor is. On the demos here, I'll be using Svelte, and we'll see why in just a moment. But in each of these applications, you've got a list of products, and we can go look at the list from the menu. Here's the list that we have. We can also look at a list of discounts that we can get. And on the list of products, we can also edit those products if we want to. Notice we can also log in and log out. So if I bring this one front and center, I can click on log out from GitHub. Now when I'm logged out, notice the list and the discounts stay unauthorized. When I log back in through GitHub, which I already authenticated, so now it just says welcome John from GitHub. Now we can go back and see the different lists and discounts. So we can see we've got security both through authorization and authentication. You'll also notice the URLs in each of these windows. They're all using custom domains. I purchased the shopathome.dev domain. I think it was like 10 bucks. And with that domain, I basically set up that www is the Svelte version. React.shopathome.dev is the React version. Angular.shopathome.dev is the Angular version. And Vue.shopathome.dev is the Vue version. And all these are perfectly accessible where you can reach those right where you are while watching this. Okay, so let's take a look at the code in the application for a minute. And all this is available up on GitHub. And I'll give you the links at the end of the presentation. But if you're anxious and want to get there quickly, from any of these web applications, if you click on the Code in GitHub button, it'll actually open up GitHub in your browser for you to point you at the code, which is also right here. So back to the code example. What we've got here is a mono repo. Mono repo, for those of you not familiar, is exactly what it sounds like. It's a repo that's one repo, but what that means is it's got multiple applications in it. In this case, I'll zoom in a bit and we can look at the left. It has a folder for the Angular app. It's got a folder for the React app, Svelte, and Vue. So all four applications are in this one repo. Why do that? Well, one thing is an ease of use. I can build and test all these applications at one time. Also, there's a lot of similarities. I built the same app in 4 technologies, so all the similarities, I get to see them in one place. And then probably the most technical reason is that they all share exactly the same API, the same back end. So I have one API folder to go get my discounts, my products. And that's written with Azure Functions. And that's in the same project here in the monorepo with Angular, React, Svelte, and Vue. So all those are set up for us to succeed. Now, if we look at the Svelte application, we can see inside of here, there's our source folder. And inside of our source folder, we've got our products in our store and our models. We've got our main homepage here. It says home. And we'll get rid of that. We can see here it says manage your shopping list, become a preferred customer, gain access if you'd like to. If we look at this side by side with the Svelte version of the app, put it on the right and the left here. I'll zoom in a little bit. We can see it says manage your shopping list over here and log in to start enjoying your benefits. What we can do is we could change this message to something else. So maybe what we want to do is right above that, let's go ahead and create an H3 and we'll say welcome Azure Thursday. Just like that. Now, obviously it's not running on the public web yet, but we just made a change and we want to push this up to the cloud. So what we can do is we could automatically just see how this works. I make my code changes and we're just going to say having fun. I'm going to commit that change. I'm going to synchronize it through VS Code. And then it's synchronizing. Now what's happening in the background now as it goes up to GitHub is it's building the application. And then it's going to deploy it to the web. So let's take a look at what's happening here. On the right, again, we've got Shop at Home. If I refresh, you're still not going to see the Azure Thursday quite yet. It has to build and redeploy. But let's take a closer look at what's happening. If we go up to GitHub directly, and I go over to Actions, you're going to see right there at the top, it says having fun, and it's spinning with a yellow circle. That is the having fun commit that I just made 26 seconds ago. And in progress, it's rebuilding that application so it can automatically deploy it. Now, a couple other things here. Let's say you didn't know that you could go there directly to the Actions tab. If we go back to VS Code, there is an Azure Static Web Apps extension that you can get to from the A over here. You can see mine's right there. Let's say you don't have it yet. What you can do is click on these 4 squares. You can type in Azure Static Web Apps. and it will find for you the Azure Static Web Apps extension right here. The extension is in preview, but the product is not. So the extension is a bunch of tools that we can use. I've already installed mine. And then through that extension, you can see I've got one called Shop at Home that I created. This is the Azure Static Web App. And I can do is I can right click and I can choose browse the site, or I can say, go ahead and open it in the portal. I can clone the repository. There's a bunch of things I can do right from here. And you'll see the production site is going to main. If I click on the action, you'll see the having fun is right here. And you'll notice it's got a gray or whitish circle saying it's running. And what we could do is we could right click, we can go view the properties. We can also go look at the steps right here at the action log, or we can go directly to the browser and watch it run. Now this has been running for about 2 minutes and it says green over on the left now. That means it's done. It took 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Let's click on it. And before we do that, let's see if it works. We'll go to the right-hand side. We refresh, and you can see Welcome Azure Thursday. And if you refresh your browser, you should see that as well, as long as there's no caching. Now, over here, it said it was successful, but if we click on that, we can see the build and deploy job. And under the build and deploy, which took about 1 minute and 6 seconds, if we scroll down, you see some interesting messages. So Azure Static Web Apps utilizes this thing called Oryx. It's an internal tool at Microsoft that you can use, that you can learn more about here, to basically build the app. Let's step back for a minute. Remember that we were talking about how we just want to build, we want to create our code, develop our application, but somebody needs to run npm run build. That somebody is being run through this action on GitHub. So here it's setting up Node on the machine. It's using this Node version and npm. It's going to run npm install on my package file. It's installing everything it needs, which there's a lot of stuff in there. Took 24 seconds. Nice to see. And then it keeps running through. It's going to run npm install production. And then down below in the green area, you're going to see a couple interesting pieces. Down here, finished uploading. So it put the built assets into an artifact and then uploaded that to Azure at this URL. This URL called Purple Pond, a bunch of numbers, azurestaticapps.net. If I click on that, you'll see the same application on the left and right. Now notice this one's the big long URL and this one is the custom URL. We'll take a look at how that works in a moment. Once this build works, everything gets pushed up to Azure. But how did this ever get set up? That's really the question, right? So when we have a new application, let me zoom out a little bit. If we want to set up a new place to deploy this, what we can do is we could just click on a button up here in the Azure Static Web App extension. It says Create Static Web App. And once I do that, I can name it something. Let's just call this Azure Thursday Shop at Home. And it's going to ask me where to deploy it. Now you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, why is it asking me where to deploy it if this is deployed everywhere around the world? Well, it is. It's deployed at multiple points of presence around the world, but there's going to be certain aspects of this that will only run in one region. And I'll show you what those aspects are in a moment. They're actually really important for staging environments. So I'm going to just mention East US 2. I can then pick either a custom framework at the bottom, or I can pick one of these pre-built frameworks because we happen to know a lot about Angular, React, and Svelte apps. I'm going to choose custom just so you can see the step-by-step pieces. It's going to ask me some questions like, where is your app code? Remember, in my app, everything's inside of a folder called Svelte app, or Angular app, or React app. So I'm telling it here, yeah, it's in this folder called Svelte app. And then it's going to ask, where is the location of your build output relative to your app's location? In a Svelte application, there's a public folder. That's where it puts all the built assets. In React apps or Vue apps, it could put them in a dist folder. In an Angular app, put it in dist/name of the app. So it gives you the opportunity here to change where's the location of the code. This is important so it knows what to push to Azure. And then once you do that, it's going to go ahead and generate the new application and push it up into Azure and set up a new static web app. Now we've already got one. I just created a brand new one as well. But we're going to use the Shop at Home one. But you can see down here, we can also go check these out up at the web and see the actions running. If I click on that, let me show you what's happening. You can see that there's a new CI process running for a new static web app that we have. I'm going to cancel that, which we can cancel on the right, just because we don't need that specific one to run right now. All right. And if you ever want to delete one, you can. Like over here, we can right click it. You can delete Azure Thursday Shop at Home. And it's going to tell us down below that it's going to go through and delete this, because what it created was a place to put all the files up in storage in Azure. It created a way to connect the backend functions, if any existed, to that storage. It creates a way for them to connect the backend to the front end. So a bunch of Azure services are getting created for you in the backend, but you didn't have to know which ones to create or how to connect them. It just puts them all together for you. Cool. So I mentioned something about how we check this out and how we can configure it for the custom URL. Let's take a closer look at that. Inside of here, in the extension, we've got Shop at Home, and I see production. We can see a bunch of other options like application settings. So we can see do we have any environment variables that we want to change or set. Here I have one that I happen to create for application insights, so I can instrument my application too. And then I can click on this button here if I want to show visibility of the key or not. I can also see if I have Azure Functions running for this particular app. And this one I do. I've got 5 different functions to get the discounts and then full CRUD for products. And then I've got different GitHub configurations that I can check here. You can notice that I've got 4. You might wonder why I've got 4. Well, that's because in the same repo, I've got React, Angular, Vue, and Svelte down here. And the GitHub configuration is the 3 main questions we got asked. Where is your application, Svelte app? Where is the artifacts for building, public? And then it didn't ask me this before, but I happen to set it. This is the optional piece of where's your API. Mine's in an API folder. So we can look at all that from here, but what if we go right to the portal, which you can do by right-clicking and choose, right here, where is it? I always forget which node it is. There we go. At the top node, Shop at Home, you can choose Open in Portal. And I've already got it open, so let's go ahead and look at that. Got to find the right window again. Put this one over there so we can see it side by side. There we go. So you got VS Code on the left, and we've got the portal on the right. And in this portal, we see an overview of Shop at Home. It shows us the URL without the custom domain, Purple Pond, but I bought shopathome.dev. So what I want to do is go to custom domains. And in here, what you do is you get 3 domains that you can configure. One out of the box is this Purple Pond. They make up a name for you, and that's the name of the URL. That's the one that comes out of the box. Well, I wanted to have www.shopathome.dev and svelte.shopathome.dev to work for me. So when I purchased shopathome.dev, what I did is I added both of these by clicking the add button to add the custom domain. Now you only get 3, which is why the add button's not there anymore, but all you have to do is buy the custom domain, click add, type the name of the domain in, and then it tells you, here's a key that you have to add to your DNS. So whoever your DNS provider is, where you bought your URL, for example, you want to go to them and put that key in there so it can point your DNS back to Azure and run your site. They say 24 to 48 hours for DNS changes. In my experience, I usually get pretty lucky, and it's usually within an hour, which is nice. For me, I've already set up shopathome.dev. Now, you might be wondering why I set svelte.shopathome.dev up. Well, that's because the main app is running on Svelte at Shop at Home. But let's say I go back, you'll notice I've got a version of it running for React. So I click on Shop at Home-React, and I go to Custom Domains. You'll see this one is running at a different URL called Brave Desert. And that's why I have this subdomain of react.shopathome.dev, and it's pointing to a different URL, which I could probably copy that, open a tab, paste it, and there you go. And here, because I only have 2 being used, I could click the add button. I could type in the domain, so I could say mydomain.com or spell it wrong. And then after you hit the next button, it'll verify that you have the domain. So let's say I put shopathome.dev. I could say foo, like that. Once I hit next, It's then going to tell you, okay, there's your domain name. Go ahead and copy this CNAME and add it to your DNS. And then once you do that, you can click add here and it'll automatically go look for it. It takes anywhere from a half minute to a minute to verify that you actually have that set up. And then it'll automatically ask the DNS to propagate. And I didn't set that up yet for foo, obviously, so I'm going to cancel that one. So that's how you set up custom domains with this. Now, if you've got a function like I do in these app folders right here in the API, you can see I've got functions like go get my products. So if I got a simple set of code here that says go get my products from this data provider, it's an async function and it returns them if they work, and if it doesn't, returns a 500. All this automatically gets connected to the application. So my app, I just have to call the back end, which is shop@home.dev/API by default. So in my application, all my back end calls just get pointed to that. Now, let's say I wanted to make a change, but I didn't want it to show up right here. Like we said, welcome Azure Thursday. Let's say it's not really Azure Thursday. Let's say it's Azure Friday. So what I could do is I could go over to my code and we can reopen the page that I did this on. And here it was welcome Azure Thursday. And actually, let's just change it to goodbye Azure Thursday. Why not? Let's say I don't want this to go to production. I'm making a change, but I want to see it actually run first or get it ready to run first before I actually go live with it. So I want to do is I want to make this change, but not quite to prod. So what I'm going to do here is open up a new branch. I'm going to call this branch, we'll just call it test/mytest, just to be kind of cryptic. And then I've got my new branch. I can commit my change. I can say new title. And then I'm going to push my branch. That's going to ask me in VS Code, would you like to publish this branch? Yes. It's going to push it up to GitHub. So far, nothing about this is involving static web apps. Down here, it's saying, would you like to create a pull request? I do. So when I create that pull request, it's going to ask me here, do you want to create that from, I always check these over, the test branch here to main? Yes, that's what I want. I click on create. And now let's go back to our application and let's click on the code in GitHub. We can see there's a pull request right here called new title. And you notice there's this little yellow circle next to it. It's actually running a build. Because I created a pull request, if we click on this, we can now see there's a bunch of checks happening. This is the Azure Static Web Apps workflow with GitHub Actions. It's building the application for us. But wait, I don't want to overwrite what's in production, right? I don't want to change my initial message there because I was just testing this out. So let's see what happens if I go into here. What I can do is I can click on the details of any one of these. And it brings me over to the actions. I'll go full screen here. So you're seeing it's setting up my job and building the application. And now we're going to watch this. The first thing it does is it creates a container in the background to set up the place to build everything. And once it does that, notice you're seeing here, ooh, I found your app directory. That's Svelte app. And it found an API. That's great. So now it's going to configure everything to get ready. We're about 1 minute into this job. And remember, the last time we ran the job, it took 2 minutes and 2 seconds. So it's going to be around that time frame. Now it's actually going to go through and it's going to set up node and npm, do our npm install and see what can happen for us. Now we have a failure. So if I click on the failure, we can see what's happening. We come through here, we can see we have a bad request. Now, if we're looking at this one here, it's saying the static web app was no matching web app was found or the API key was invalid. What this means is I didn't set up a brand new static web app for this. So therefore, I got an error when I created it. Whenever you get this error, it basically means that something happened. And what happened for me, and I wanted to point this out because it might be something you run into, is I recently changed my branch from master to main. And when I did that in the portal in Azure, it knows the thing was called master, but it didn't know I changed it to main. So therefore, I got something out of sync. So I have to go back into the portal and tell it that it's actually pointing to main. I'm not going to show you how to go through all that right now because that's just minutia. But if you run into that, that's what that error message often means. For us, If I hadn't have done that, it would have rebuilt the application, created a preview URL, and it would have launched it. So we have two URLs running, one with welcome and one with goodbye for the application. The last piece I wanted to show you was the authentication and authorization in the app. Now remember, in the app, we have these authentication authorization sides. So we've got our list and our discounts, which we can access. Well, if I log out, I can't get to either one of those. And the way I'm logging in here is I can use out of the box Twitter, GitHub, or Azure Active Directory. You can also set up custom authentication as well. And there's documentation on this. If I set up GitHub, you'll notice what's happening is I get access to, it knows I'm John Papa, and it sees I can get access to the list and discounts. Let me log out, and I'm going to go in as Twitter. So now Twitter's asking me, who are you? There's my Twitter ID and my password. I'm authenticating. Now I've got a TFA code that's coming to me from somewhere. I entered the wrong code. It's because I got to check my text message. It's not texting it to me, so that's okay. All right, so we're going to get back out. Choose a different two-factor. Let's go to text. There it is. You guys can all see my code real quick. Now, when I log in with Twitter, you'll see I've got this list is working, but the discounts are not. So why is the difference in behavior? With GitHub, I could see everything. With Twitter, I couldn't. Now, what's going on? So I can see both here, but the difference is back in the portal. So if we go back to the portal itself, we have to find our button to get there. There it is. We'll go back to Static Web Apps, Shop at Home. There's another button here for role management. Notice in the role management, I've got John Papa at GitHub set up. And that's giving me the identity here of preferred, anonymous, and authenticated. Preferred users in my application are automatically set up to be able to get to the discounts and the list. But if you're not preferred and you're only authenticated, you can only get to the list, which is why Twitter is not on that list, so therefore it can't get the discounts. But GitHub could. So if I go back to GitHub, notice I can have access to discounts. That's because it's in the preferred role. So what I can do is I can invite myself with something like Twitter. I can type in my Twitter ID and the domain. I have to pick which domain I want it for. I could do www.shopathome.dev. I could give myself the role of preferred, generate this link. I could email it to somebody or give it to them, and if they click on this link, it'll automatically add Twitter as one of those identities. So I want to do that. I can just copy and paste it in here since that's me. And now I'm logged in as Twitter, and I've got my list right there. And I've got it cached, which is happening in this one. Oh, hold on, let's go back. Did I close it? Let's refresh it. There we go. John Papa, preferred, and it's a caching issue, but it allowed give me permissions to go to both of these places. And I don't want the Twitter one to exist long-term, so I'm going to delete that one. So you can manage your users and your roles right here from this page, which is kind of nice. Now, the magic that makes that work is like, where do you set up these rules of who can do what in your app? If you go to the Static Web Apps config file, this is a custom file that you can create with Static Web Apps. And what it allows you to do is set up special routes. Some of these routes are just redirections. But what others are, like this one here, it says, okay, if you want to get to products, all you have to do is be authenticated, which is kind of redundant. I'm just doing that to be explicit. So as long as you're authenticated, you can see the products. However, you have to be in the preferred role to get to the discounts. That's my rule. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do, you can't get there otherwise. You can get to any other API route you want as long as you're authenticated. Then I have a rewrite here. It says, or redirect. I want when you log out, it's actually going to go to this URL, just because under the covers, that's a little uglier. So I like to say log out. You can do pure redirects as well to HTML content. You can also have a specific status code come back if somebody tries to go to a specific place. In this case, we're saying, I don't want you to allow the Azure Active Directory login, so therefore return a 404. Now, in any of these web applications, they have something called a navigation fallback. So if you want somebody who goes to the wrong address, for example, we go to shop@home/John Papa. That's not a page. Well, the behavior I want is it to go to this page here. What's happening on the server, remember, is it's looking first for a file called johnpapa.html. Well, that doesn't exist. So unless I code this properly, the Svelte app is never going to run, or the React app. I need a fallback to say, I found a bad page. I want you to load the Svelte app and then let its routing kick in. And that's what these navigation fallbacks do for Angular, React, Vue, and Svelte. So here we're saying if somebody finds a 404 basically in the back end for an HTML page, automatically pass the index.html up and let the front end framework handle it. But we're going to exclude things like CSS and image files. And then there's just some other kind of overrides that you can put in place if you want to. Like if somebody tries to get to a page in the server that doesn't exist, you could also do a custom 404. So there's a lot of control over what you can do. For the authentication, the reason I couldn't see anything for discounts is because unless I had that preferred role, you can't go anywhere. And this is just a file with a special name that you put inside of your distributed artifact folder that gets deployed, and Azure reads that so it knows how to read your rules. Now, this does not get exposed up on Azure, so people can't change it. This is something that Azure will then take and use for your application. So cool. Let's get back into the slides and we can wrap up where we are. Oops. Looks like I lost my slides. I guess I'll go open them up again. Here we go. There they are. So we had all those things that we just took care of. We had www, we had custom domains, we had SSL, we had an API, we had a reverse proxy, we had CI/CD, we had CDNs, points of presence. What else do we have? Authentication and authorization and SSL. Azure Static Web Apps handles all that for us. The nice thing is we just write the app, it globally distributes it, it handles the security for us, gets us our SSL. We just point it to our custom domain and it handles the rest. It integrates with Azure DevOps or GitHub, your choice for CI/CD. And you get an integrated API if you want to use that too. And you can also get those staging versions that we talked about or preview URLs for pull requests. And all that's out of the box. My favorite part is you can choose whatever web framework you like, React, Angular, Svelte, for example, and then deploy that to Azure Static Web Apps. So once you have the application that you want to use, and you can test this out right away, if you want to try this at home, here's the links that you can try. There's 3 to remember. The first one is the Learn link. Learn is a tutorial. It's a hands-on tutorial where you can learn how to do everything I just showed you and more. So it'll walk you through creating an application and deploying it to Azure. No account required. You just need to go into the application. I even give you a sample app that looks just like what you're seeing here, so you can deploy it yourself. And you get to pick whether it's Angular, React, Svelte, or Vue. If you want to learn more about what you get with Static Web Apps, you can go to the docs page at the second link. And let's say you're not using one of these 4 frameworks. I've got a repo that I created, the community is contributed to, and I believe there's 41 different frameworks in there. It's this Hello Worlds repo. And if you go check that out, bring that over here. You might be using one of these frameworks. You can use any one of these to try it with Azure Static Web Apps. Blazor, for example, or Babylon, Aurelia, Gatsby, Flutter, Knockout, Marco, Polo, Meteor, any of these. So it's a lot of fun to check these out that are up there in the web. And the last thing I'll show is that once you try this, I find one of the pages that's most useful is the docs page. And right on the second page on overviews, hosting plans, it shows you what you get for free right out of the box. So you can kind of see you get the web hosting. I mean, everything I showed you, you get for free. If you want, you can go to a paid plan and it gives you a little bit more as well. If you want to bring your own functions or your own authentication providers, for example, or if you want more than those 2 extra custom domains, you can go to 5 if you like, and there's a paid plan for that. But what I love is out of the box for free, you get everything I just showed you, and it's really quite a lot to take off your plate when you're building applications. So the end of our story is, what do you get? You get to write code and deploy it and not have to worry about all those things we talked about. So hope this is exciting for you as it is for me. I'm really happy because this solves a problem that a lot of web developers have these days. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take any.
Yeah, that's normally my cue to start with a lot of questions that popped up in the chat or even in my head. But I have to admit that you basically already won me over when you said Azure Static Web Apps allows you to focus on the code. And that was my cue going like, oh, okay, this is awesome. I can now just focus on what I love to do and not worry about all the configurations that I have to do to make it happen. So that already won me over. And definitely that link to the page of what do I get for free really nurtures the Dutch in me. So thank you for that.
Of course,
John.
yeah. I really like the authentication part. Really, really awesome features. Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we didn't have any questions in the chat, right?
No.
And also no Disney fans in the chat.
No, apparently not.
No.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So no questions for you, John, but really great presentation. Thank you very much for being here and showing these awesome features. And oh, there is one question?
I adore static web. Question about authentication. Does it get passed to the functions?
Does the
Whether the authentication gets passed to the functions itself within the Azure Static Web App.
So you're saying, would you? Yes and no. So the authentication lets you basically look to see if you can secure the functions at the front end, so you can't even call those from the authentication if you want to. But if you want to use and actually inspect the identities inside of those, there is a way to do that, but it doesn't automatically happen. Probably a deeper discussion with the docs you'd have to look at.
Yeah, because this sounds like a very interesting use case to provide single sign-on for additional functionality in your web apps.
Yeah, that's really where that custom authentication provider I mentioned, which comes with the standard plan, where you can do a little bit more with that. But I'm not 100% sure on that. I haven't tried that yet. It's something I've been itching to do because I have some functions that has different authorization than the app does, and I really like to see how that works. So I'm going to tell you, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I think you can do that with custom authentication.
Yeah, and you can use claims principal binding data to show all the claims inside of your function.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a whole new world to bring back the Disney theme.
It is a whole new world, yes. Or Star Wars, if you like that. So.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Jan.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you very much.
So that means that our Azure Thursday, our last full virtual Azure Thursday has come to an end. So thank you all for joining again, and hope to see you next month on November 2nd in the Jaarbeurs in Utrecht to join us with our Ignite viewing party. Hope to see you there.
Definitely.
Bye-bye.